Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. First, I want to recognize the pastor of this church, Reverend Stephen Tickner. We pray that he is feeling better. Secondly, to the leaders in this ministry, those with titles and those without titles, to all those who simply are committed to carrying out the unique mission of this church. Then lastly, I want to give a shout out to dear friends of ours, Joe and Nora. We hope that they are doing well, and we miss seeing their presence today. This church, in my estimation, under Stephen's leadership, by its works, is a reflection of the mission, the message, and the ministry of Jesus Christ. I appreciate this church's unique message, this church's unique cry, this church's unique concern for this community. Because in our everyday existence, things can become so regular that we just adjust to them the way that they are. Sometimes we underestimate the power of persistence and the value in simply doing good to other people. The mission, the message, and the ministry of Jesus Christ is counterintuitive to our nature. The ministry, the message, and the mission of Jesus Christ goes countercultural to the way that most of us have been trained. It challenges us to do the things that may appear maladjusted to this culture. Things like being in close proximity to the homeless, spending time with groups that are considered unclean, doing things like praying for those who misuse you and loving people who don't love you back. The perspective and the ideology of Jesus presses the buttons of our heart in ways that are constantly making us uncomfortable. In a letter to the Galatians, Paul, in chapter 6, what we just read for your hearing, tells the followers of the carpenter, Jesus, and I am summarizing this morning, do good to all. Do good to everybody. Restore relationships. Bear the burdens of one another. He tells them very forthrightly to stop thinking that we are somehow better than others. And then he tells them, stop comparing yourselves to other people. Simply measure the good that God has uniquely placed in your heart to do. But it is in verse 9. He tells them, let us not become weary in doing good. If you've been around as long as I have, you know sometimes doing good can be draining. Do I have a witness? Sometimes doing good can wear on your emotions. Sometimes doing good can wear on you physically. But Paul in this passage says very candidly, do not become weary, do not become tired in doing good. For at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Somebody say, don't give up. I thought about this passage because today, if you don't know it, is the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And by the way, just a side note, I think Pastor Stephen mentioned it in his message, on Monday at Mount Pleasant AME Zion Church, we will celebrate his legacy as a community, and you're all encouraged and invited to come. But Dr. King embodied, in my estimation, this passage that we read. His approach to capturing the human heart while challenging the civil laws was countercultural. He was prepared, in his own words, to end the long night of injustice. I admit it can get hard trying to follow the carpenter. Has anyone in here tried to follow Jesus seriously? It can get hard, can it? Smiling when you don't feel like it, saying hello when you ain't really got nothing to say, trying to do good with people who reject your good doings. It can be hard trying to follow the carpenter. It can get frustrating trying to do good. Doing good can be, brothers and sisters, a thankless job. Fighting for fair wages can be a thankless job. Fighting for fair housing can be a thankless job. Fighting for educational equity can be a thankless job. Fighting against police accountability and police brutality can be a thankless job. Thankless is often associated with doing good. But I want to push us today, with the few moments that I have, this platform. I want to push us today by saying, don't get tired of helping. Don't get tired of serving. Don't get tired of being a blessing. Don't get tired of praying. Don't get tired of being available. Don't get tired of showing up. Don't get tired of doing good, because at the proper time, God's people, God's place, God's world, humanity will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Somewhere I read, some philosopher said, maybe it was Gandhi, be the change that you in fact want to see. If good is going to be prevalent and present in our world, then we have to become the good that we intend to see. We have to become the good that we intend to be. If change is going to be a reality, there's not going to be a lightning bolt that's going to strike us. There's not going to be any unique cracking of the sky. If Jesus is going to be reflected here on earth, Jesus is going to be reflected through you and I. We become Jesus' hands. We become Jesus' feet. We become Jesus' eyes. We become Jesus' heart. If Jesus is to be reflected, if good is to be reflected in our space, then you and I are going to have to be that. As I close, I remember Jesus said, be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. And I think, my brother, there is no better time than to consider Jesus' words. If we are going to challenge the systems that have caused harm and that continue to cause harm, then we're going to have to place ourselves in a position to do good. And can I say to you this morning that doing good doesn't always mean you're going to be liked. Doing good doesn't always mean you're going to be favored. Doing good doesn't mean you're always going to be popular. But sometimes, as Dr. King said, sometimes it's not about popularity or expediency. We do good. We do right because the time is always right to do right. And so I want to challenge us this morning, on the birthday of Dr. King, that we too have an opportunity to be a drum major for justice. That we too have an opportunity to fight for what's right. That we too have an opportunity to stand up for what's good. That we too have an opportunity to be a voice for the voiceless. We too can stand in the gap for those who have been hurt and harmed, misrepresented, overlooked. We too have an opportunity to stand in the gap for good. May I read it to you one more time, and then I'll take my seat. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. I want to read this last portion for you. You know, as a Baptist preacher, you have 3 closings. I've given you 2, so I got 1 more to go, and then I'll be out of here. I want to read that last part of Galatians because I think it's so important, because it challenges us to take advantage, and it communicates something that I think we often miss when we read this passage. Galatians 6, verse 9, verse 10 says, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. Can I reiterate it for emphasis? Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. Somebody say all. All. Somebody say all. All. Somebody say all. All. Did we say some? Did we say a few? We said all. And all simply means what? Everybody. All simply means, as my pastor would say, all. It simply means all. We have an opportunity to do good to all people. Every day that we wake up, we have an opportunity to demonstrate good.